Powered by the Montana Television Network. This is the 5:30 News on Q2, Montana's news leader.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Russ Riesinger.
And I'm Jeanelle Slade. Well, if you didn't have to step outside today, good for you.
Hey, here's a live look from the Q2 iCam tonight. A shallow cold all across the region, and it is settled in for the next few days.
But first, this just in. The names of 4 people killed over the weekend in a plane crash just north of Billings were released late this afternoon. The single-engine Cessna crashed Saturday evening around 6:30 in the Bull Mountains, located between Billings and Roundup.
Yellowstone County Sheriff Mike Linder identifies 69-year-old David Halo as the pilot of that aircraft. Also killed in the crash, 36-year-old Rusty Jungles, 35-year-old Michael Peterson, and 32-year-old Raymond Rumbold, all from Billings.
Preliminary investigations show the single-engine aircraft may have clipped a guy line supporting a radio tower on the top of Dunn Mountain. Q2's Zoe Zandora talked with a longtime flight instructor today who raises some questions. Zoe.
Russ and Jeanelle, as I dug deeper today, I found out some interesting information. Now, after tracking the plane and researching flight routes, I found on the live air traffic website, the plane departed Billings shortly after 4, and the pilot called in the air traffic control Saturday night that he was heading east. Now, if you
Starlane 736 Yankee uniform at the west end for taxi with Tango, destination Hardin, 5,000 feet, request 28 left.
In 6 Yankee uniform, Billings ground runway 2 at left taxi via hotel. Where's your destination again?
Hardin, Bighorn County Airport.
Roger.
So you could hear him saying Hardin. Now, if you look at the map where the plane crashed, it's nowhere near Hardin. The plane crashed north of near Dunn Mountain as if the plane was heading to or from Roundup. Now, I spoke today with Robert Katz. He has been flying for nearly 40 years and is a commercial pilot and certified flight instructor. He tracks incidents like this plane crash, and he says because he is interested in the decision of making the pilot and how the pilot gets involved, he says in this case at this point he has more questions than answers.
Why is he flying so low when the chart that's available to him is going to indicate elevation figures and presumably obstructions in the area? Also, another question that has emerged is this issue of flying into a guy wire of a radio tower. There is no radio tower depicted on the chart in the vicinity of Dunn Mountain. That might be an oversight in the charting process, or there might not be a tower there at all. We don't know if that was the intention, was to fly, say, to Hardin first and then turn north intentionally toward Roundup, or any of the other nefarious possibilities, such as becoming incapacitated, disoriented, a mechanical issue with the airplane, all those possibilities.
Now, we did just confirm with Sheriff Mike Linder from what he observed that at the scene that the plane hit both the tower and the guy wires. Now, that tower, by the way, is 185 feet tall. It's a radio communication tower that contains antennas and frequency for local law enforcement, including the sheriff's office. Again, tragic and more questions on all of our minds, something we'll be able to find out after further investigations continue from the FAA and National Transportation Safety Board. Russ and Jeanelle.
All right, thanks so much, Zoe.
All right, on to the weather scene. Q2 Chief Forecaster Bob McGuire joining us now. And Bob, we've got, I guess, some good news. It's not going to get quite as cold as we thought.
That's the headline. That layer of Arctic air is only about 1,000 feet thick. So what's the deal? Well, let me show you. Here's a high-resolution model, and I want to show you the direction the snow is coming out of the southwest to the northeast. You'll notice that's the direction it's going. So what it's doing, it's taking all that cold air that wants to come down from Canada, and that layer is actually pushing it back up to where it's going to go. It's going to go back up towards the high line and things like that. So this will continue to be the thing right on through Wednesday. And so when it comes to temperatures, check this out. This is our forecast lows tonight. Here in the Billings area, about 3 below zero. Yeah, cold, but not as cold as the high line. We're talking teens below zero. What about tomorrow? Well, tomorrow is going to be pretty cold as well, but we're looking at 5 below zero for Billings, not the 20s below zero they have up at Cutbank and Glasgow and places like that. Originally, it looked like it was going to be about 16 below here on Tuesday night and Wednesday, but that's not the case now. Some good news. We'll have more about that coming up in a few more minutes.
All right, thank you, Bob.
Well, so even with this better news from Bob, School District 2 has issued its cold weather protocols.
At this time, the district doesn't anticipate the need for any delays or alternative bus routes, but will notify parents and guardians of any changes with the robocall system. However, it is smart to expect buses to run a little late, so it's best to observe these winter safety tips.
Those include dress for frigid temperatures, allow yourself extra travel time, and stand far enough away from stops just in case the buses need extra room with the snow and ice.
Police have made an arrest in a shooting outside a Billings bar last spring that left a man dead and have issued a warrant for another man they say was also involved. 36-year-old Gregory Boyd Jr. was booked Saturday on 5 felony charges, including deliberate homicide, in that shooting that happened outside of Lee's Saloon last April. An arrest warrant has also been issued for DeAndre Golly, who is facing the same charges. 27-year-old Shane Nez Pierce was killed. The 2 other men were wounded after a fight that left a relative of Boyd and Golly's unconscious. Both Boyd and Golly could face up to 100 years in prison if convicted.
A suspect at large tonight after an early morning armed robbery at a Billings West End gas station. A tweet from the Billings Police Department says just before 4 o'clock this morning, a man wearing a black hoodie, a mask, and gloves showed a gun to an employee at the town pump at 3150 King Avenue West. Now, police say the man then made off with nearly $3,000 in cash.
Well, another example that sports can draw people together.
The search for missing Hardin teens Selena Not Afraid will reach the 2-week mark tomorrow, and an active support at a high school basketball game over the weekend shows Hardin it's not alone. During Friday night's basketball game against Shepherd, both teams and fans came together for a group photo. The Shepherd Phillies shared this moment on its Facebook page. It says, in part, witnessing the concern of the Hardin community firsthand was heartbreaking.
Now, Hardin players wore shirts that said "Hope for Sel." The 16-year-old has been missing since the early morning of January 1st. Selena was reportedly last seen as she walked off at the rest area along I-90 between Billings and Hardin. Montana state lawmakers kicked off a week-long informal session this morning at the Capitol in Helena. It's called Legislative Week, an experiment on getting lawmakers together during a year where they don't have the regular 90-day session. Things began today with several committee meetings, including some detailed discussions on property taxes. Another item on the agenda is a study on whether the legislature should meet regularly each year instead of just 90 days every 2 years. But most of all, lawmakers say they hope to get reacquainted with their colleagues who they usually see just every other year, and together learn more about the status of major issues confronting the state.
What we get out of it is keeping our relationships and our knowledge and our experiences up to date as possible by doing these things and getting together so that we can talk about updates on the budget, our revenue picture, and key issues of the day in the state of Montana.
Attendance for the week is voluntary for legislators, although a majority of the 150 members are expected to be there.
A potential delay in Montana's $80 million bonding construction program and the disputed audit behind it is back in the news today. The legislative office in charge of the audit spoke publicly for the first time, and state lawmakers weighed in as well. MTN's Mike Dennison has more.
The audit, which is not yet complete, reportedly says the state's Medicaid program has eligibility problems and could have to repay the federal government $150 million. Last week, the Bullock administration said that's not true. And they said they've had to delay the construction bond sale because that information could make the bonds more expensive to investors. Legislative Auditor Angus McKeever told a committee Monday that strict rules simply prevent him from discussing an audit before it's complete.
While I know that in the attention and media-driven environment that we live in now, that us not commenting on things is not always popular, and it doesn't always meet with people's expectations, there are very important reasons why that doesn't occur.
That explanation didn't sit well with some committee Democrats, who said the audit didn't examine what the state actually does on Medicaid eligibility.
And it is beyond my comprehension how you take that approach instead of what was agreed upon by the federal government and the state of Montana in terms of eligibility, and you prioritize that.
McKeever said his office or the audit isn't forcing the governor's office to change its bonding decision. But the governor's office said the Medicaid liability ID'd by the audit must be disclosed and therefore needlessly impact bond sales. The final audit won't be discussed until an April meeting of the Legislative Audit Committee. The committee chair, Senator Dee Brown of Hungry Horse, said she doesn't think it's that big of a deal.
Nobody needs to, jump off the roof or anything. The buildings are going to be built, the highways are going to be tarred, the streets are going to be finished, and Montana is going to be better for it. This is a little bump in the road.
Reporting from Helena, Mike Dennison, MTN News.
Thanks so much, Mike. Now, the $80 million in bonding projects include water and sewer projects, bridges, and state buildings on college campuses.
The National Alliance of Mental Illness of Montana Executive Director Matt Kuntz of Helena has been selected to serve on the Department of Veterans Affairs National Research Advisory Council in Washington.
Now, Kuntz also serves as the director for the Center of Mental Illness Research and Recovery at Montana State University. He's been involved in mental health since 2007 after he lost his stepbrother to a post-traumatic stress-related injury from military service in Iraq.
Kuntz tells MTN his duty in D.C. will be to help guide the council on its healthcare research toward veterans.
I think the main goal is the right treatment at the right time for people who live with mental health conditions, for veterans who live with mental health conditions. That has always been what I've been obsessed about from kind of the first day.
Kuntz will head to D.C. in March for his first meeting with the Research Advisory Council.
Well, there's more news from across our state. On tonight's 9 o'clock news, we'll cover all the top stories from east to west, and prepare to bundle up because the statewide forecast is showing cold, cold, and more cold. Join Russ tonight at 9 on the CW.
But first, still to come on tonight's 5:30 news, the perfect solution to these cold temperatures, maybe a hot cup of soup. And a new Billings dining option is now ready to meet that demand.
And in sports tonight, an interesting bull riding weekend for Montana's Lockwood brothers. Scott tells us what it means.
You're watching MTN News with Jeanelle Slade and Russ Riesinger. Storm Tracker weather with Bob McGuire. And sports with Scott Green. This is the 5:30 news on Q2, Montana's news leader.